Well, hello, everyone. I want to thank you for the invitation to speak to you today. I'm Carig Stanford. I'm the chair of the IUCN Tortoise and Freshwater Turtle Specialist Group, and I was invited to speak to your symposium in Nepal to give a brief overview of IUCN and the specialist group and our work with tortoise and turtle conservation for your symposium on turtles and tortoises and their conservation in Nepal. And I was supposed to go to Nepal last year. The pandemic prevented that, and I was very excited about going and having my first chance to interact with Nepalese conservationists and biologists about turtle biodiversity there. I've spent time in India and other parts of Asia for my work, but I've never been to Nepal, so I look forward to coming after the pandemic is over, I hope in 2022. So let me share my screen with you and talk about this issue of turtle and tortoise conservation. And what I'm going to be doing is really just giving you a brief overview of our work at IUCN and of the problems involved in turtle and tortoise conservation, and a little bit of a focus on Asia and some of the problems in Asia that we're dealing with and that you all are, I'm sure, familiar with already. So Asia is, as you know, is the epicenter of the turtle and tortoise extinction crisis. When we look at the taxa overall, 360 species and nearly 500 taxa total, turtles and tortoises are the most threatened group of vertebrates on Earth, along with non-human primates, which ironically is the other group of animals that I work with. They are the most threatened group. And the majority of species are now in one of the endangered or threatened categories assigned by the IUCN Red List. At the specialist group, we do a lot of things. We work with CITES in trying to monitor the trade, the illegal and the legal trade in turtles and tortoises, which, as you know, is increasing every year. We also publish on the current status of turtles and tortoises in the world. We had a paper that came out in the journal Current Biology last year, 2020, with 52 co-authors. It was really the most comprehensive literature review that's been done of this current status of turtles and tortoises in the world. And then we also publish publications like this, which is not scientific really, but it's intended for the public and potential donors to conservation work that basically outlines and illustrates and explains for people in very readable terms which are the most critically endangered species in the world today. We have been dealing with extinction for a long time, and of course every group of animal on Earth is at risk of extinction in some way or other, either near term or in the distant future. We've only had one taxon go extinct in recent decades, and that was in 2012. This was one of the giant Galapagos tortoise species found on Pinta Island. This was Lonesome George, the male who was the last animal to die of that species at the Darwin Research Station in the Galapagos. So we're fortunate that we have many species that are on the brink of extinction, but no species that have actually gone extinct except for this species in many decades now. And we're trying to keep it that way. We're trying to prevent any more extinctions, of course. The problems we deal with are large problems and difficult ones to solve. Certainly the most severe problem for biodiversity in general, as you know, is habitat loss. And this is a problem that we worry about in the developing world because that's where most turtles and tortoises live. You may know that the two centers of turtle and tortoise biodiversity that are the absolute epicenters for their biodiversity are, number one, in my country, in the United States, in the southeastern United States, places like Florida and the surrounding states. That's one. And the second is the Gangetic Plain, which means all across northern India and then into the Terai region of Nepal as well, and then into Bangladesh. So you live in one of the two critical centers of turtle and tortoise biodiversity, and we are trying to prevent the loss of further habitat and the degradation of further habitat that will affect species diversity all over the world, and those are two critical places. For a very long time, people have been eating turtles and tortoises. This is particularly a problem in East Asia and Southeast Asia, where they have been food items for thousands of years. It's only been in recent years that the that the smuggling and the commercialization of turtles and tortoises as food have reached critical levels. It is true that China, which is the center of the food industry of turtles, is also farming vast numbers of Chinese softshell turtles, Pelodiscus. However, this trade in food extends really around the world, but Asia, East Asia, Southeast Asia, the center of that. However, in recent years, there has been a rapid exponential increase in the pet trade. I'm sure you recognize these as Indian star tortoises here at the lower right, and these are South American redfoot tortoises, radiated tortoises. These were taken in a market in Bangkok, and so the global trade in wildlife overall has become so enormous that on some routes, for instance, across the Pacific between East Asia and North America, it rivals the drug trade. It rivals the narcotics trade in terms of the amount of money that's changing hands. This is a tremendous, terrible problem. Turtles and tortoises are a part of it, not the entire problem, but it severely impacts many species because they have value as pets. And now with a rapidly increasing middle class and affluent class in East Asia, China, and surrounding countries, Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, it has fueled a trade in these animals that bring thousands of dollars in markets in Asia as pets that we have great difficulty dealing with. And this has led to some of the enormous confiscations that have been made that fall under the purview of CITES that then IUCN and we in our role at IUCN are involved with monitoring and trying to help prevent from happening over and over again. And as you know, these animals are often shipped in suitcases and disguised in boxes as other items. There is very high mortality, but they are so valuable. These are mostly plowshare tortoises and radiated tortoises. This is an interception at the airport in Bangkok that even if a few survive, it's worth it. And the risks involved in smuggling tend to be lower than the risks involved in smuggling narcotics. So let me just highlight a few Asian turtles that are really at extreme danger of extinction. This is almost certainly the rarest turtle in the world. This is the Rhophodus swinhoai, is the Yangtze River giant softshell. It has been reduced to one male living in a zoo in China and two other animals living in lakes in northern Vietnam. These were recently discovered, and the sex of one of the animals in Vietnam, we are very happy to learn is female. At least one. The other one is not sexed yet. So we have one captive male, at least one wild female, and there is some hope, some very slim hope for the survival of the species. There was a second female in that same zoo in China. This is my Australian colleague, Gerald Kukling, who was practicing artificial insemination in an attempt to get some captive breeding going. The species is very prolific. They lay 40 or 50 eggs with each breeding. So even one successful breeding would really save the species, even with low genetic diversity, but nevertheless. Unfortunately, the female died after several artificial insemination attempts. And so now we are very hopeful, with a very slim hope, that the animals in the wild in northern Vietnam can represent the future of the species. The most critically endangered tortoise in the world is no doubt the plowshare tortoise, or Winifera, which lives in northern Madagascar. This is a very large tortoise, 20 kilos, and it has been reduced to probably less than 50 in the wild at this point, 50 adults at least. It is being bred around the world in Madagascar in captivity, and also at a few breeding centers outside of Madagascar. The problem is the species takes 20 or 25 years to reach sexual maturity. So it's a very slow process trying to do captive breeding. And there is a hope that we will eventually be able to have a successful captive bred population around the world. And the hope would be that someday the animals can be reintroduced to the wild to Madagascar, where currently we can't do that because they would just be poached again. But this species' future is definitely living under a cloud until we can succeed in captive breeding and also protect some of the natural habitat. You're all familiar with the problem of Indian star tortoises, I'm sure, which are not in Nepal so much as across the rest of the Indian subcontinent, but they are smuggled widely, legally and illegally shipped to different parts of the world. This is the Myanmar Burmese star tortoise, which was essentially functionally extinct in the wild. And then with the dedicated work of conservationists in Myanmar, and thousands that have been bred in captivity around the world, the species is now being reintroduced to the wild from zoos in Mandalay and Myanmar and other zoos internationally. And now the species has hope again. It needs to be protected once it's placed in the wild because otherwise it will be poached. But there is hope for the future of this species again. And it looked very, very bleak just a few years ago. Probably the poster child, probably the iconic image of a critically endangered tortoise in the world today is the radiated tortoise. Beautiful tortoise. I took this photo in its natural habitat in Madagascar, the southern tip of Madagascar. In 2018, there were 2 confiscations, one of 11,000 and one of 7,000 animals that were found in houses, stacked like potatoes in houses in Madagascar, awaiting shipment via ships that were moored off the coast that were destined for China. Most of the animals were intended for the pet trade. Some of the animals were being butchered to be sold for their meat. But this tortoise existed 30 years ago in the many millions of animals. We don't have a good estimate, but many, many millions. And today its total population has been reduced to less than 1 million, and it is dropping very rapidly. And confiscations continue, and this animal has been bred widely in captivity. It will not go extinct because of captive breeding, but in the wild, its future is quite bleak right now. And in your own region of the world, we have magnificent animals like this large Badager which lives in places like the Sundarbans in India and Bangladesh, which is nearly extinct in the wild and is being bred in captivity in Bangladesh in very, very small numbers. But there have been no successful nestings in the wild and very, very few in captivity in a very long time. And another species of Badager that occurs in Nepal, Badager kachuga, I was able to see this species in the wild for the first time in Uttar Pradesh in North India 2 years ago at the Chambal River. And this is a species that is being, there are head starting programs going on. My colleague Shai Singh is running a Turtle Survival Alliance and WCS funded program in Uttar Pradesh and doing amazing work there. But the species certainly is still in danger. Even with individuals, hatchlings being released into the rivers, there still are great problems of sand mining along those rivers. And the fact that these are very powerful large turtles that swim kilometers, and the possibility that they may simply swim away from their reintroduction points into areas where fishermen will just continue to catch them in nets. And they'll swim into degraded and more polluted parts of the river also. So they're certainly in trouble. And there are projects going on attempting to protect them and restore populations. The same is true for Badager Tripatta, which is a Burmese roof turtle. And in Myanmar, the species was just on the brink of extinction, is on the brink of extinction. But now we're having some successful captive breedings in the zoo in Mandalay, and we have some hope for the future and for reintroductions. I think you may know Chitra indica. This is the largest soft shell on the Indian subcontinent, and it is a magnificent big turtle that is also at major risk. Many people don't even realize this turtle lives in the rivers near them because it's very difficult to see, spends most of its life on the bottom, but it does continue to be caught in fishermen's nets, and it is now being bred in captivity for the first time, but nevertheless, the species is in terrible trouble. The black softshell Nilsonian nigricons was believed to be extinct in the wild for a long time. Now we know there are very small populations in Assam and also possibly in northern Bangladesh. And it occurs mainly in captivity in temple ponds, in both Hindu and Muslim temple and shrine ponds that are in Assam and in Bangladesh. I visited them 2 years ago. And the species is now being captive bred with the assistance of different groups at those temple sites, with the hope that not only will the temple ponds be permanent long-term reservoirs for the species populations, but also the possibility of future reintroduction to the wild. So that's my overview. And I just wanted to tell you that we are very excited that Nepal is involved in the effort to do turtle conservation. What's needed in Nepal is fairly basic. And I've been talking with Nepalese biologists about this for the past couple of years, which is to do some surveys to find out what really is in places like Chitwan and elsewhere. And once we understand the patterns of occurrence, we know that populations have been much reduced, but when we find out exactly what lives where, then I hope that we all can work together to establish some conservation projects in your part of the world. So that is my talk. I wanted to thank you. I hope I haven't run over on my time, and I wish you a very good symposium, and it's been good talking to you.